Hey everyone, welcome to InfosecTrain. So today we'll be discussing about the domain 4 of the CCSP examination, the cloud application security. So what all updates are basically there in this domain for the new exam pattern. So my name is Krish. For more information, you can visit my LinkedIn profile. So team, in this domain, what I have felt is that the weightage is almost the same only, but the thing is that in this domain, they have specifically mentioned the certain areas of or certain topics which we have to stress on this domain. Like it's the same previous topics which we have mentioned plus some additional, some one or two topics are there, and they have basically specified what all things we have to learn in certain topics. For example, in the previous exam we have a topic called as threat modeling, but here in this particular new exam pattern they have basically mentioned which all specific threat models we have to go through, like that. So first of all, team, they have basically discussed about the common cloud vulnerabilities. So it's a very important thing to understand the common cloud vulnerabilities. Like they have mentioned that there is a OWASP top 10, the SANS top 25. So basically, you may be thinking, so Krish, the OWASP is basically for the applications and all, right? But the OWASP is having the top 10 for applications. The OWASP is having the top 10 vulnerabilities for cloud. They are having the top 10 vulnerabilities for APIs. Like that, they have many more. So basically, what they basically plan to say is that they want you to understand the OWASP top 10 specifically for the cloud platform. I can show you a glance of a team. This is basically what we call as a OWASP top 10 for the cloud platform. So it's a very important thing. You have to understand everything in detail about what exactly is the various vulnerabilities in the cloud platform regarding based on this OS top 10. And in this particular thing, team, I expect that they will be asking questions on the scenarios. Like they will give you a question based on scenario, and they will ask you which of this OWASP top 10 is applying to that scenario, something like that. So that is one very important topic which we have to keep in mind. Like the same way, team, the next topic is that we have something called as a threat modeling. That's also a very important topic which we already had in the previous domain. So first point is that why do you have a threat model? See, when you say threat modeling, the first point to keep in mind is that threat modeling is basically for, it's a kind of exercise we do in the cybersecurity, right? To identify the various threats and attack surface for an application. So it's like a baseline, which helps you to basically act as a benchmark for identifying the various threats. Which can be used by our development teams and other members to identify the various cybersecurity threats and the strategies to help us to develop the strategies to remediate them while very early in the software development process. And we have a lot of threat models are there in the market, and the most commonly heard names are these three, that is a stride model, dread model, and pasta model. So to give you a very simple comparison of this models, team, what I will tell you is that the stride model is basically adopted by Microsoft, and it's a very most popular model, and it's more what I feel is that it's focused on the developer. So it's more of a developer focused. What does STRIDE stands for, team? STRIDE stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privileges. So it's more of a Microsoft's threat modeling methodology, which help us to align their, trustworthy computing directive. And basically, what is the primary goal of it? So we can basically think about the security in the design phase itself. That is also a very important exam question you have to keep in mind. When talking about threat modeling, they will ask you in which particular threat model or which particular SDLC level is this threat model is coming. So don't forget, it's in the design phase. Threat modeling is basically a part of design phase. Even if security will come from the primary first phase itself, threat modeling is come as a part of the design phase. So stride is a very common model which we use. In fact, it is basically more focused on the developer approach, right? Then we have something called as a dread model, team. So dread model is basically something which stands for damage, reproducibility, exploitability, affected users, and discoverability. So it was something which is formerly used by Microsoft, and it's basically even if we have this model in picture, but it's not so much used now. It's abandoned now because it's not very consistent. The reviews and the ratings given by this model is not very consistent, and there's a lot of debates going on that. So it's discontinued by Microsoft in 2008. So just to understand this model is basically a very important thing. Like damage means how much damage an attack can cause. Reproducibility, what do you mean by that? Is it possible to, or how easy it is to reproduce the attack? Exploitability, how much work is it to launch the attack? Affected users, that means how many people are basically affected. Discoverability, how can we, or is it possible for us to very easily discover this threat? Like the same way, that's what we call as a dread model. And then we have one more model called as a pasta model. So the pasta, it's a I will say that's basically what we can say, it's a more of a attacker focused. Okay, this is more of an attacker focused. So PASTA stands for it's a process for attack simulation and threat analysis. It's a relatively new application threat model, and this is basically having some total of 7 steps in the whole attack process. Okay, it's more of an attacker centric perspective on potential threats with the risk and impacts. Okay, and don't forget this is more focused, or let's say the output of a PASTA model is more of a asset centric, we can say. Okay, so basically these are the three models we have to understand, and these are very much important for the exam. They have clearly mentioned that in the exam guideline. See this, you can see that they have mentioned it's the stride, the drill, then the ATASM and the pasta. These are basically very important models to understand. Then team, they have basically mentioned about the next thing is we have a secure coding. So they have added the topic called a secure coding there. What is secure coding? So ensuring that we follow the best practices for writing the code, or basically we are basically it's like a more of a sanitization, or basically ensuring that the code is basically written and the code is basically deployed or as per the proper safe coding practices. Like there is a OWASP ASVS, that is a OWASP application security verification standard is there. So the ASVS is basically a project which provides a base of testing the web application, what we can say technical security controls, and also provide the developers with a proper list of requirements for secure development. And there is one more thing which I feel which is very important called as a safe code. What is a safe code? See, safe code is a non-profit organization. Okay, which stands for Software Assurance Forum for Excellence in Code. So they are a global industry-led effort to identify and promote the best practices for developing and delivering more secure and reliable software and other things. So these are basically very important for the exam which they have added new, but I don't think that they will basically have a lot of questions on this, but you have to understand these things just to understand how the patterns can be, or basically how the safe code can help us to bring the reliability in the coding and delivery of the application. Then team, there is a very important topic called as a abuse case testing. So abuse case testing is a very important topic, I felt at least. The reason is because team, when talking about abuse, you have always get confused about this. Like I have seen many people say this is same also. There are two words. One is a misuse case, misuse case, and one is a abuse case. So what is a misuse case? See, misuse case means that you are testing an application disregarding the requirements. Like for example, it means the word itself is misuse. That means what? It's a complete opposite of the use case. So basically what we're doing team, we are trying to explore or do things which are not mentioned or which are not supposed to be done. We are trying to do all these things, and basically we see if there is anything wrong. Or let's suppose that in an application we are supposed to basically upload a particular kind of file only, or let's suppose that we are supposed to enter a particular kind of value only. We are trying to do opposite of the use case, or we are trying to do something which we are told not to do, or basically we are not told to do about it. Okay, so basically what happens, this is more of a usability point of view. That is why we call it misuse. But at the same time team, we have something called as a abuse as well. What is abuse? This is a very important thing. In fact, I have seen this is a most important topic when it comes to the real-time scenarios. That means it's a more of an offensive approach, or we can say it's a more of a destructive approach. So what we basically do it, we try to make as much as damage to the application. We are not trying to pamper the application. We are supposed to we are trying to make enough, or we are make more trouble to the application, like using some third party applications, or using some user mechanisms, or during using some mechanisms we are somehow trying to destroy the application. We are trying to basically deface or basically take down the application. That is what we call as a abuse case testing. It's basically it will help us to bridge the gap between the use cases, but it's more of a offensive way of doing it. The primary goal is to cause errors or damage data, or basically affect the stability and all these things of the application, to see in what all ways, using what all mechanisms I can make the application crash or make a serious damage to my application. That is what we call as a abuse case testing. In fact, in security architecture, when talking about DevSecOps and all, this abuse case testing is a most important topic, because end of the day we are trying to see how much the application can withstand. And then team, in the exam I have seen the one important topic is federation. Of course that is basically there in the previous exam also. I just want to stress on that. It's basically a very important topic when talking about the topic called as federation. You know what is federation, right? So federation, SSO, APIs, and all these things are assured questions in the exam. So you have to always go through it in much more detail. Like for example, let's suppose that we have an API. So you can expect at least one question or maybe more than that regarding the API security and what all damages we can cause the APIs. And whenever talking about APIs, you must always understand what is an API, how the API is basically communicating to the underlying layers, or what all storages in the cloud platform is basically where we are making API calls. All these things are something which we have to understand. So this domain, I felt it's very important, team, like especially when it comes to the examination perspective. And of course, this CASB and all these topics are basically very important. If you have some doubts on this topics, team, you can drop me a message on the below and I will basically make a video on that. Thank you so much, team. See you in the next video. Bye bye.